So Steve, you want to just
Yeah, so
yeah.
I'll start talking about like general. So more just than graduate program, but post undergraduate degree in general. So different options are presented. So you can think about doing a master's, and plan for a terminal master, meaning that you know that you don't want to go for more than that. So that's a potential path, whether it's in economics or in a specialized program. There's various programs, School of Policy Study, masters like master in finance or in business. So those are common avenue that our student takes. There's also the path toward a PhD. So some students often know that, yes, I would like to do a PhD. And in that case, I will talk about that strategy a little bit later on also. And then sometimes there's a lot of people, for example, that might be puzzled by law school. I think economics and law match very, very well. So that's another avenue that the student takes. So let me first talk about within Canada, and then I will move to international and US programs. So Canada, all universities, and I will put a small quote mark between all university. Western is moving a tiny bit in a different direction a little bit, but most all the other institution in Canada in economics offer what you call a terminal masters, and they're usually 1 year. So that's intensive, and often there's maybe a paper to write, but often you don't have to do a thesis. So it's often all course option, like SFU is offering. Now, when you're thinking about what university I would like to apply, all graduate studies, the important is this, there's a big component is the training, and often the training that you will receive at all reputable university is going to be very similar. What makes the difference is the signal. So some institution succeed to attract better graduate student, and by that meaning that firms knows that they are attracting and that they are able to select stronger student. So the reputation of the university matters. So in Canada, UBC and U of T are kind of the two leading institutions. And after that, there's a good group of very strong program, including SFU, Queen's, McMaster's, some university in Quebec, Francophone University, or like University de Montréal or McGill, which is in English. And Western, as I said, they're moving toward a path where they're streamlining master student to continue as PhD student. I'll come back to that when I'll talk about the US. So that's basically the second group of very strong institution. And after that, there's still very decent program like Guelph, University of Ottawa, University of Victoria. University of Alberta. So there's basically those hierarchy in terms of the program, and the better program, more reputable, opens more doors when it comes to employment. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Steve, do you mind if I ask you a quick question? Because I forgot to mention this in our prep. There is a difference between some of these programs because some are more professional and some are more academic. Could you maybe clarify that just a little bit?
Yeah, so most of the masters in economics are going to be more academic, but some other programs, some other masters, like for example, the masters in public policy that we are offering at SFU, and University of Alberta is also, or Calgary is offer this program also. So those are much more apply and much more like hands-on in terms of the types of material that you're going to be exposed to. So is it answering the a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. And just to let everyone know, we have had a handful of students apply and get into the University of Toronto Masters in Financial Economics. And this program is specifically geared to train those people for the capital markets and money markets, usually in Ontario. So just to let you know, there is that program available as well. And some of our SFU students, I think one currently is attending there from last year's cohort.
Yeah, very good, Azam. That's an important piece of information.
Yeah.
Then there is the U.S. market. Most interestingly, it is not a common thing, except for a more specialized program like we just talked about, to have terminal masters in the U.S., meaning that you are getting accepted at the university, like let's say Harvard, Princeton in Master in Economics. It is kind of the expectation that you're trying to do a PhD, and if unfortunately you're unable to pass some barrier exams, but are successful in all your courses, you end up leaving with a master's degree. So that's a little bit of the difference. Now, there are terminal masters even in economics in the US, but when you are going to look at institution, you need to make sure that you pay attention to that, especially that the programs that are geared towards a PhD are often much more academic, and they are much more intense. Now, if you want to, if the PhD is what you were looking for, I always advise students and says, take that one extra year, go to a strong program in Canada, do a master's in Canada, and then apply from your master's to a PhD program in the US. It gives you a better training, so both more chance to be accepted in a good institution in the US, but also once you're there, it gives you some advantage versus student that comes straight from the undergraduate degrees. So that's for the US. Now, international, there's variety of program. There's some that offer like terminal masters, like Canada. I would think about, like, for example, LSE, which is an excellent program, an excellent place to do a master's degree. There is all over Europe, there's all those now, like it's really popular to have like these schools of economics. There's, Aix-Marseille School of Economics. Even if it's in France, the program is in English. So there's a lot of these European and all over the world program. There's different quality. Frankly, some are very, very, very good. Some, they accept a lot of students. And obviously the signal that you're sending when you get a master's from one of those programs is less strong.
Can you get to the next slide? Can I start with that?
Yes.
Steve?
Yeah, I think you're the best for that.
Okay, so this is a typical question, and that's why we have the CGPA requirement. Carmen, thank you very much for bringing all this research to us. So when you look at these requirements for admission into these graduate programs, and we're looking at the Canadian universities right now, these are minimums, right? So when you look at someone like SFU, we have a grade point average of 3.0 that we require. This is minimum, but most of these universities, especially UBC, U of T, are going to have their admissions based on cohort, and the cohort that's applying at that point. And the average required of the admission, CGPA required is much higher usually. So these are just, again, minimums. And again, it's going to differ from different universities. Listen, everyone, you have to understand that there are MA programs accessible, but Canadian universities are in general very, very good and recognized. Good master's programs, I think, around the world. So you're going to have quite, your competencies are going to have to be decent. Now, the smaller schools, if you're looking to definitely focus, the University of Calgary's, the University of Manitoba's, they're going to have a little lower, and they're there are good master's programs. You're going to get great training. I know one of our students went to Concordia, actually. And the reason they went to Concordia is because not only did they get a good offer, and Steve will speak of this later in terms of funding, but they also had a chance to help do some research with a notable professor. And so they jumped on that chance. They knew that they would be able to get that somewhere else. So look at where you're applying, what kind of offers you're getting, and don't be discouraged by some of the high admission criteria. If you're there, get our feedback, we'll let you know. So those are CGPA requirements, but usually we're looking in the B plus, the 3.0 at least minimum range for most universities. Another question that we get often, and I'll let Steve jump in here, is the question of reference letters.
Yeah, so I will, one thing that I will also mention is that, yes, there's these GPA requirement. There's basically like these are the minimum, so that, so if you don't reach those minimum, you don't even apply. In general, there's enough application that, as Azam says, that you need to be above that. But one thing that is also really important is the pattern. So if you are one of those students that has, grades that are above that, but you're thinking it's not, my first 2 years really pulled me down, or my first year pulled me down because, I was not maybe like adapting, but you're doing extremely well in the last years and your uppers division grades are great, that matters a lot. So when people look and evaluate student, an upward trend, it's something that is quite important. So that was the one thing I wanted to add about
Thank you.
your grade. Reference letters. So reference letter, usually that's, your grades are important for the reviewer to be looking at your file carefully, but once that's done, that's the reference letters that are important. What do you look for in a reference letters? You want to have two things. First, you want this reference letter to be credible, so that when a reviewer look at it, they will say, okay, yeah, I trust that letters. And the second thing is, you obviously want to have the most favorable letter as possible. So that means that choosing your the person to write reference letter for you are extremely important. What do you want? In general, you want to have regular faculty. So you want to avoid having sessional, because if you can, because regular faculties, we know each other's, and so that means that it there's a little bit of that extra credibility to those letters. In fact, you can look at, if you have a bunch of professors and from important course, you can look at their CV, and if the person looks that they're publishing a lot, that might matters actually. That's something that you should pay attention. The second thing, you want them to be in courses, hopefully, that are difficult. So 302, 305, 402, like the course that we'll mention later on, that are like important course to take if you're preparing for a master's degree. So those are courses that are renowned to be difficult, and so those are preferable. Or third year, fourth year seminar where you have papers, those are excellent course to ask reference letters. When I see a reference letters from a first year course, I'm always thinking, why for a first year course? So often you want to have upper division courses. And the other thing is, you want to have the strongest grade as possible in a class. So so those are the elements that you should look for when you're thinking about the reference letter. And I think later on we'll we'll talk about how to approach. I think it's on another slide later on. Azam? Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
But if we do not have it on another slide, we'll remember to get to it. And one of you have to maybe remind us to get to it, because it's important how you approach your professor and how you go about doing this. Statement of interest.
I can start, and then maybe you can complement a little bit more. The statement of interest it's important to pay attention to that. It has different value or different importance depending on where you apply. If you apply to a Canadian master's in economics, the statement of interest is that, it's going to, the reviewers are going to look at it, but it's not going to matter that much in the end. Maybe to explain things like, if you have a very, slow start and you have a very great upper division courses, you may want to use the statement of interest to highlight those things, to say, I know that I'm not having a stellar GPA, but look, I really focused on my study in the year 3 or 4, and I succeeded to get good grade in all those courses. So you kind of highlight your strength in there. So that's one thing that you could use for. Now, if you are applying from any other program that are not in economics, those statements of interest are much more important, because reviewers will often want to know why the person is doing a switch. And also it's a place where you can highlight your writing skill also. So it needs to be clear. It needs to be focused. It needs to be non-repetitive. And so that's another place where it's important.
And I think you covered everything, Steve. Just to let you know, everyone knows that you're enthusiastic and you're excited to apply for a program, because I think that's in every statement of interest that we get. But what's more important is maybe adding just a little bit of an element of why. And when Steve mentioned that, you have to do some research. So if you know that Steve Mongrain is teaching at SFU, and he may be one of the profs teaching a grad course, maybe a little bit about his research. Don't write a huge essay on this, but interested in this field, and particularly maybe interested in taking a class that I know that you're teaching, and hope to pursue further. So little things like this can help a little bit, and shows a little bit of depth as opposed to a generic statement of interest. Great. Just a couple of other things. Oh yeah, just a couple of other things with the last slide about reference letters, because I don't want to forget this, and my colleague Antea just reminded me. When you're asking for reference letters, you're required to give reference letters from people who are instructors, faculty. Someone like myself and Antea are great personal character references if you get to know us, because we're advisors, but we are not great referees for academic programs. I've been a great reference for jobs, but not academic programs. They're not interested in hearing from me. And it's not that we wouldn't want to, Antea and myself, because we've seen your academic history, but it's because we haven't taught you, we can't express anything from that point of view, and that's what they're looking for, just to let you know. Okay, next slide. Okay. Oh, sorry. Do I have to be an honor student? This is a question, and we've evolved with this question. Do I have to be an honor student to apply to a graduate program in economics and others? Steve, you want to start? And
it's useful. Honors program, the interesting thing about honors program is that they are very different. Like every university is honors program is slightly different. For example, SFU, there's some GPA requirement, but there's most importantly, there's the selection of courses that you need to take to be accepted. So at the end of the day, if two candidates have similar GPA and similar course choices, even if one doesn't have an honor, it's not going to be harmful. I think the best value of the honors program here at SFU is that the selection of course that you must take really prepare you well for a graduate program. So first, it means that you have a more credible package. So a reviewer are more likely to say, yes, we'll give that person a chance. And also you're more likely to succeed in your graduate program. I don't want to scare you, but the steps, you'll see that once you start a graduate program, the step is high. Not only because it's more demanding, but because everyone around you are good. So you're like, at SFU, you're at the top of the food chain when you're thinking about applying to a graduate program. When you arrive at the graduate program, all the big fish are there. So the step is big. So I always say to the student that comes is that, if you have one more semester or two more semester and you're thinking about which course should I take, go and take 402 and 403. Those and 435, those are going to prepare you for a graduate program. So those are extremely important. Fourth year courses also, when you're thinking about those courses, are going to be important, and those could be potentially other fourth year courses, could be some that you will ask a person to be a referee, but definitively that combination of 402, 403, and 435 that are much more academic in nature, and they are often, when I teach 402, I run it as a boot camp for graduate students. So those are important.
So just across the board, to be fair, when you look at the UBCs and the U of Ts, the level of people applying, most of them are honor students. So it'll be very difficult to get into these programs without. But many of you are good students, and I'm assuming that you're good students. And you're like, hey, listen, I came to the honors program late. Like, I didn't even know about it, and it's a bit too late, and it's money involved. I encourage you to still apply to some of these top tiered universities, maybe the second tier universities, as Steve was mentioning, the University of Ottawa's, the University of Calgary's, because you've demonstrated strong competencies, and often our students start getting their groove going in economics a little later. That's why your upper division your upper division GPA and economics GPA matters a lot for these universities. Now, SFU, does not have, most of the people who are applying for our MA program do have sort of an honors background, but there are students that do not, right? And they can be compensated. You can have a balance. So if you have a lot of mathematics, for example, behind you, your Calc 1, and say you've taken Calc 2, say you've taken Calc 3, say you've taken linear algebra, and you've done this combination, and you're only a major. I can tell you with a little bit of confidence, and I'm going to have Steve back me up, that you'll be considered, especially if you're a good student. And so don't be discouraged by this. Now, for the students who are applying for programs outside of econ, like many do, finance, even the public policy, I wouldn't encourage MBA right away, but these other programs. I had a student just apply for a political economy program, I think at Carleton, the Patterson School. Steve,
I think that one.
Yeah. Yep. And they're a major, but they're a strong major. I don't know if they got in actually, but so don't be discouraged by this. Reference letters, we'll come back to it, are going to matter a lot, okay, in these circumstances. So not necessarily, but it would help.
So Azam,
and also, go ahead, Carmen.
Oh no, I was just gonna say we have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
one
go
from
ahead.
Yashi about reference letters, but I think we'll get to that when we get to the slide about reference letters. And there's another question from Dustin. Dustin, do you want to turn on your mic and ask the question?
Yes, I was just have a question for Dr. Mongrain. You were talking about the graduate level being harder in terms of grades, et cetera. I'm just wondering if maybe this is my perception, but if it seems like since you're in a smaller group with higher performing people, you would maybe feed off of them a little more. Because one of the things I've found with undergrad that's been a bit weird is like the size of the classes, and it's hard to get any, I guess, synergy going is the best way I can put it. So
yeah, those are a very excellent question. First, when I say harder, the grades are adjusted. Like usually, when you're in a graduate program and you end up in a course with a B, is a kind of a very, not a poor performance, but it's nothing to brag about. Like in general, you'll see a lot much more A's because we're taking account that, hey, you're all the best student, but the amount of work to get these grades are much higher. Now, yes, that's always what I talk about when I do I often do introduction to the grad program, like a little session like that for our new student. And I say, see the fact that you have good colleagues around you, not as a source of competition, but more in fear, but more as a great opportunity. And then that goes through for like even more important for the PhD program, because you're going to spend hours and hours discussing your thesis with your colleagues, and even the best supervisor cannot give you that much time. So yes, the environment. I did my PhD at Queen's, and Queen's was excellent as fostering great interaction between students.
Okay, thank you.
Just a final note before we change slides. For those of you who don't feel like you have access to the 402, 403s, 435s, you can contact either Antea or myself, because you can get permission. Now, some of these courses get full quite quickly, but I know, for example, Econ 402, there's room, but you have to understand as well that 402 and 435 are only offered every fall. Right, and 403 and 494, 499, our honors programs are only offered in the spring semester, so you'd have to time that. But if you're looking for permission, if you have good grades in 302, 305, and are not necessarily an honors student and would like to have access, begin that conversation with myself or Antea. Thanks. Next slide, please.
Okay. So I would speak for myself. I'll give you a little bit of an idea about how I deal when I look at the file. So you have a big stack of file to be evaluating. So obviously you're going to first, set a little bit of a threshold about should I really pay attention to that file unless I see a minimum GPA that is a little bit above what, like the minimum that is posted. But then also quickly, I will look at the econ GPA and upper division GPA to see if like, oh, okay, I was not planning to really look carefully at that file, but I see good econ and good upper GPA. So then you evaluate this. Then I jump to the reference letter. I look who the letter come from and what course. And then I look at the performance in the 5 course or the equivalent at their institution, the 5 course that we talked about. So often I may not even pay that much attention to know if the student is an honor student or not, but most of the time, if the student don't have those courses, I'm kind of a little bit more I'm afraid that the student may not have the background to actually succeed. So that's what are the important thing that when I personally review, and I think a lot of my colleagues here and other institutions proceed in some types of similar fashion.
I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint right now. I mean, sometimes I wish we could, and I'm sure Professor Mongrain also feels the same way, that we can speak to potential interested econ students who are, actually the chair and I were talking about this yesterday. After you take Econ 2-1, some of you really get like, okay, I like this stuff, right? And we wish we can gather you up and start giving you hints. And one of the hints that I try and give, and that I'm sure Antea tries to give as well, is listen, if you're interested in grad work and you're interested in getting a reference letter from a professor, if I look at someone like Professor Mongrain and I've taken his class, I've done well, I'm going to also look at other classes he's teaching and take more classes with him. And on top of that, I'm going to figure out what school he graduated from. And I know he graduated from Queen's. And if I know he's graduated from Queen's, maybe I'm going to apply to Queen's, right? Because if I can get a reference letter from Professor Mongrain, who's an alum of Queen's, my guess is it's going to hold a little bit more weight when they start looking at, it's Steve, right? So I'm not saying they say it's Steve, but little strategies like this, keep in mind.
Yeah, no, especially for PhD program, some people pay a lot of attention to the detail. Like they go and look at the publication record and try to see if the person even have co-author at the institution that you're applying to. So some people will actually very strong candidate that have a bunch, like a basket full of A is an A+, might ask different institution, different people to write letter because of where they're from, connection that can be seen on the CV and stuff like that. But in general, yes, the when choosing regular faculty and faculty that seem to be active researcher is a desirable trait for a referee.
And next slide, please. Good. So you go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
Do you want or?
No, you go for it, for sure. Okay.
Yeah, so we talked about how to select. Now in this slide, I really like that Azam actually put some information about prior, the build up, take more course as Azam said, be active in office hours and in class. So then it will be a lot easier for the faculty to remember you and have a more complete description of your potential when writing a letter. So having 2 courses makes my life a lot easier to write a reference letter. Having a student that I know from office hours also helps. And it's desirable also to have faculty that courses that had a written component in it. That will be able to assess, especially if English is your second language. There's a lot of questions that are asked in terms of writing and oral communication. So if you are, if you go to office hours and you talk to the faculty and you add the written component, it's easy for the person who write the reference letter to say, yes, there's no problem. That student will be able to do a master in English.
Can I tell a story? A quick little anecdote?
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
I had a student come in for an advising session a while back, and they said, "Oh, Antea, I asked my instructor for a reference letter." I'm like, "Oh, great. What did they say?" They said, "Who are you?" So the point is, how can someone write anything meaningful for you if you don't take the time and invest some time to get to know the instructor a little bit as well? So just how you might feel uncomfortable writing something, a reference letter for somebody that's a stranger to you, you need to take that into consideration. That's all.
I don't think this is an anecdote that's just a one-off.
No,
I think Antea gets this often.
A lot, yes.
And so do I. So a couple of other hints, and Dustin will get to your question quick in a second. One is, you know, assembling people. This is not rocket science. I mean, you know, there's not a formula. You're not fed through a computer when you apply for grad school, and you know, we look for certain algorithms or use certain algorithms to match you. The reality is your reference letters are going to matter a lot. And when and if you know, people look for key components, and that, you know, grades are great. You know, oral competency is important, but what's important as well is how you are as a person. So when we establish our team at SFU grad program, it's hard to do, but hopefully you're gathering a good team, and those people are, you know, attentive, well-mannered, polite. All right, and this is a subtlety that you have to understand when you approach somebody for a reference letter. And so when you're doing that for a faculty member, you approach with manners, right? And the best way to do it is by sending a small email, not a long email, right? It can't be 4 pages long. And we know that you're enthusiastic, and we know you're excited, but just a short email stating who you are. Listen, this is where something like LinkedIn is very important, because if you can add your LinkedIn tag to a request, they'll be able to see your face, right? I guarantee you, Steve in his class, or Professor Mongrain in his class right now, probably knows maybe 10 faces, but not everyone, right? So remind them, and then you can interact with them, and then ask them. Of course, you're going to do well in that class as well. Steve, you want to mention?
And Steve, would you agree, Steve, that asking for a reference letter should not be the first question you've ever asked the professor?
No, it is.
There should be some kind of interaction, some kind of investment in that report. For sure.
Yeah.
Good point.
It is, thing not to do. I received sometime a reference letter requests from a student who don't tell me in which course they were with me. You know, it could be like, you know, when I have to search and then found out that somebody that took a course 3 years with, you know, in the past with me, and I never talked to the person in any office hours. What information, and it's a large class, what is the information I will be able to provide when I write a reference letter is this person was in my class, and that person finished with this letter grade, and this person was X out of X, Y student in the ranking. I will not say, oh, I never talked to the person, but I will not be able to add any more information. So it will be a short, uninformative letter, and it will be discounted. So it's not going to help your case. You know, it's almost like throwing out a reference letter, because you can go and see, oh, that person, they got that grade. So it's important to have some types of relationship with the faculty prior to ask a reference letter. So whether it's office hour or it's in class discussion, that's important. You send an email, short, providing the information that is important. You can put your transcript also in that email. A photo is important, if you can manage. And in the you tell which courses in which year you were. In some cases, it's I remember, you know, the student clearly, and especially if it's a 402, for example, I know everybody well, but it's true. In a 302 class, when you have 160 students, it's hard to remember everybody, especially when you teach it a couple of times a year. So that's the important component too. Now, often the faculty will, you may ask for that reference letter way in advance from applying to the program. Sometimes you might say, the course is finished. I just finished like 302, and then I did so well that I'm fairly sure that I will ask. You can send an email. Most of the time I tell to the student, but when you have applied to those programs, send me the list of institutions you applied for, send me back your transcript. And that's the moment where that information is important, because that's at that moment that the faculty will write the reference letter.
Just two things before we end off with reference letters that everyone should understand. One is it's a lot of work, and I'm not trying to discourage you, but it's a lot of work for professors to write that reference letters. Number two is, if I'm not discouraging you to apply or ask for a reference letter, but be aware of what you're going to receive. So if you've established a relationship with a professor, that's great. You'll get maybe a little something. If you haven't, that's okay, because a lot of you haven't. You've been in huge classes, you're not sure. So send that information, maybe send the picture as Steve said, but also be aware that you're going to get your, this is what your mark was and where you ranked in that class. And maybe that's enough, right? For some institutions, that's going to be enough, and that's all they want. You were the top 5%, great. That's all they wanted. You got to be top 5%, great. That's all they want. So that's okay too. You don't have to have a loving, like, this person was great and they had a glimmer in their eyes of keenness. No, nothing like this. None of these reference letters are going to exist. So again, that's your question. Last thing, some of you are not going to apply for grad school right after you graduate. You're going to apply 3 years from now. How are you going to do this? Well, this is where some students have fantastic. They send a little note every year to the professor and say, hey, look, I don't know if you remember me, but I graduated in your class last year. I'm going to be applying for grad school, my MBA, and I need an academic reference letter next year. Just wanted to say hi. This is my LinkedIn. This is who I am. Thank you. And more often than not, our professors are human. They're nice people. They're usually pretty good about this, but be prepared. Some are not going to respond, and you have to be okay with that as well, right? And but most of our faculty members are really good. So that's just little hints. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Steve, before we move
on? Two last quick thing of things. You may ask a faculty to a reference letter, and the faculty may say you may want to choose somebody else than me. In that case, it's a good indication that the faculty will not be able to provide a reference letter that is going to help your case. And actually, it's not that the person is mean, it's that the faculty is trying to do you a favor by saying, I won't have the information on hand to help your case. So that's one thing. Another very small thing, if you hire agent to help you in the application process, one thing that you must not do is come up with the faculty with a reference letter that is already written by the agent. It happened to me and happened to some of my colleagues where the agent will write up a draft of the reference letter and says you can give it to your instructor and they will sign it. That's not how it works. And when it happened, it really kind of make the situation uncomfortable and can lead to you not having a reference letter from that faculty. So very important.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Steve. Next slide, please.
And there's also the question from Dustin too.
Yeah.
He's saying, is there a minimum of reference letters? Like obviously more is better than less. How, in your experience, have you found that most students tend to include 1, 2, or how many letters?
It's all in the package, application package. Some university ask for 2, some university ask for 3, but that will be clear in the, and it's mandated. So you have a certain number that you need to get anyway. So you don't have to think about how many. It will be told for you in the application process.
Funding. Maybe I'll just speak to it quickly. And so different universities are going to offer different packages to students when it comes to graduate work. So I'll give you an example of Simon Fraser University. When you apply to school here and you do get accepted, we do fund our students. We do offer funding to our students through TA-ships. And TA-ships are your teaching assistants that happen in that you have in your classes. So they are actually paid. These are paid positions for our graduate students, and actually it's a lot of work, but good work, teaching you guys in your taste, and that's their source of funding. It's just not money given to you and said, oh, go have a good year. You're actually our students are working for it. Other schools have different combinations, different offsets. Some of them do offer grants and bursaries for students to work with, and may have some TA-ships. Then there's other programs that will sometimes, if you're a phenomenal student, will offer full funding. So there's different elements. There's other programs as well that you're going to have to foot the bill, and the whole thing. So depending on where you go, we know that some students have received funding or offers from the best schools, and often, I know one person in particular couldn't go last year to the University of Toronto because they didn't get enough money to live. And they couldn't come up with the rest. So do you want to add to that, Steve? No? You're on mute.
There's a lot of heterogeneity in terms of the package. You might be able to see some of that information of what you can potentially receive when you look at the application package, but also even at the same institution, some stronger candidate receive different combination of things. So it's really important to finance yourself. You should look into that, but at the end, you'll be accepted to potentially more than one university, and then you'll have to make the choice depending on how good the program is, how much money you've been given, and so on and so on.
As a general rule, everyone, if you're applying to schools in the States, you're going to be paying a lot of money to go there. Even if there's some sort of bursary packages offered, there's going to be quite a bit of there may be quite a bit of money that you have to use out of pocket, and a lot of that might be just living expenses, but it's going to be a little bit more. I know here at SFU, I think you can survive with what's paid out with TA-ships, but and that's barely. So I'm sure there's a little bit of out of pocket that all of our MA students have while they're studying.
I should also mention SFU actually does have some admission scholarships and awards for graduate students. I think at least for econ, it's not really advertised. And I know one of the awards is on a rotation basis, is shared with BD and political science. And so I think once every 3 years, econ graduate students may stand a chance to receive an admission award to study here at SFU. So it really depends on the university. SFU Econ does have some awards for admission based, but again, I think it's based on which is the best student of the cohort that's applying to join.
Thanks, Carmen. Bryce has a question here.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that question by Bryce. So at the MA level, there's little that is done in that dimension of negotiating. What usually will happen is that you will receive one or more positive answers. You may want, if you have two in one institution, you might prefer, but there's a difference in amount of money. You can always send an email back to the admission officer saying that you would consider but you have a better offer somewhere. In general, what happened at the MA level is that the officer will tell you, well, take the one that you prefer. It's more common with PhD programs where when you receive more than one offer, you could mention again, you just kindly say, I've got an offer from another university that would be dominated, but they offer me more money, and then you can always see what happened. It happened with us and other institution where they can react. There's a little room sometimes, but usually you have to have a very strong academic record to have any leverage in terms of that dimension.
Next slide then. If I don't know if there's any more. So, oh shoot, are we have a lot of slides left, Carmen? Oh, okay, good. Okay,
No.
so I just wanted, yeah, perfect. I just want to know where we are in terms of timing, because we are okay, 1:23. Okay, so Steve, I'll let you, and I can help a little bit here too. But
I think
you
I think you should go. Yeah, you should
okay,
go.
yeah. So just this is something that a lot of students are asking, and it's a great question. Like, what am I going to learn I barely know what I'm learning now, and I know a lot of you have that question anyways. So go to the career workshops in terms of that. But I'm not sure what I'm learning now so much. But what am I going to learn at that next level? And really, it's and the next level of sort of intensive sort of academic work. So in your master's program, I'll just give you an example. This slide we take straight from the slide that we give to our master's students who start with our program. And we actually do this in August, just to give our MAs, our own MAs, an idea of what they'll be learning in their year. And so one of the things you'll be doing, economic analysis and optimization, right? So in the private sector, okay, you're looking at, pricing, economic, sort of marginal analysis, and that's huge, okay? Because I know a lot of people who are privately consulting. This is an area that's why people are hired, right? To figure out optimum price points, to look at all their resources and become more efficient and include all these costs that they didn't even know were costs that they should include in just pricing mechanisms. Okay, so that's for private sector. Public sector is not for profit, right? So you have to wonder, okay, I've got a bunch of money. How am I going to spend this efficiently? Now, the government just doesn't take money in from taxes and throw it all away. They try to efficiently do this and strategically use their money in different areas. I mean, look at what's happening now with COVID. There's been a huge outlay of money, but how is this going to be sort of allocated the most efficient way, right? There's strategic thinking and how people respond to incentives. This is huge. This is a big area now. Incentives are a big part of what's going on in the private sector, especially when you look at the data field and the Googles and all these areas. And in the private sector, it's make decisions on how many customers will respond to certain incentives. So I'll give you a good example. We have people that work for Best Buy, I know, who are in data, and they will just look at little strategies that will analyze how customers will react to things. So we'll give you a concrete example. Best Buy changed their, when you have your checkout, instead of just having a list, they put pictures of what you had, right? And they realized that people actually didn't know what they were buying, and there was a good reminder of what they were buying. And this sort of little strategy increased their revenue by, X percentage, right? And this is something that an economist was involved in. In the public area, designing policy into accounts people's and firms' reactions. Again, you're taking public policy and seeing how people will react. And finally, big data. Big data is huge. Many of our MAs are now, and even some of our PhDs are starting to go into the area of data, and that's kind of obvious, right? I don't know if we need more explaining. Steve, do you have a comment on any of this stuff?
No, that's very informative what you did.
Okay. And any other questions? Why choose SFU? Steve, this is you.
Just well, SFU, it's a great place. We train our student well. We have a solid reputation. Now, one thing is that if you're planning to do a PhD, it's usually recommended that you don't do your undergraduate and your master's and your PhD at the same institution. So often people will either switch after their undergraduate to move to a place and do a master and move on to the PhD over there. Some move 3 times, or do a master at SFU and then move. For example, you know, like if you're thinking about doing a PhD in the US, doing your MA at SFU is a potentially good idea. Again, we're also in competition with schools that have better reputation than us. You know, U of T and UBC, if you can get there, that's a great opportunity. But we're definitively in the second set of institution in Canada with a solid reputation.
So just to let you know, from our perspective and just the advisor's perspective, you know, our program is excellent, and we'll tell you that right off the bat. But also we do make a lot of effort, as we do with the undergrads, to try and professionalize the program as well. So a lot of MAs go into, or a lot of students go into the MA program hoping to do a PhD and go further, but often what they realize is, hey, listen, you know, maybe I've had enough. I just want to do an MA and maybe want to go and work. And so we've had, for the last few years, quite a number of our MAs get recruited for consulting jobs. Many of our MAs work in the government and abroad. And so we have a lot of these sort of alumni speakers that come back and speak to that. We have one coming on October, Carmen Mohammed Zaid, I forgot when, October 28th, I believe, who is an MA alum. So one piece of advice that we have is, if you're considering any MA program anywhere around Canada, I would think about connecting with students who are SFU students who've gone there, and ask them questions, right? And we could try and help with that as well. We know students who are part of programs not only at U of T, but UBC and elsewhere. So we could try and help with that as well.